gentle listener, and welcome to the 200th episode of Nocturnal Transmissions, the fortnightly podcast that has been bringing you dark diversions, both old and new, since the year 2017. And what better way to mark the occasion than to invite back our dear old friend, the Diamond Geezer himself, Ian Sputnik, who has been sharing his twisted tales with us since, well, 2017. Now, as we've said before, Ian is a UK-based horror writer, as well as the editor and owner of Sanitarium magazine, an independent publishing house. He has previously featured on Nocturnal Transmissions no less than 6 times, but we intend to change that to 8 times over the next 2 weeks. It's our 200th episode, so we're going to share 2 stories with you, both penned by Mr. Sputnik. Our first you will hear right now. Our second we will release in precisely 1 week's time. It's 2 for the price of none, gentle listener. So let's get this nasty little party started right, shall we? Nocturnal Transmissions is proud to present Part 1 of our 2-part 200th episode celebration. Just Do It by Ian Sputnik. Charles got out of the bath and gave himself a quick towel down. He then stood at the sink, combed his hair and brushed his teeth. His thoughts were foggy. Even after a tepid bath, he still felt like death warmed up. He briefly mused that nobody said like life cooled down, which was surely the same, if not similar. He shook his head to clear his thoughts of the ridiculous comparison. He wandered through to his bedroom and started dressing. As he put his socks on, he instinctively rubbed his lower legs. He looked down at the scars that ran from his ankles to just below his knees. Some were large and deep. Others were thin and long, like elongated hairs, but with a pale red hue. His thoughts slowly meandered back to that day, over 20 years ago now. The event that would mold his mind and body to what it was now. He was scarred, both inside and out. But Charles was resilient and headstrong, and with that strength he had made a good life. He had a beautiful wife, a lovely home, a blossoming business, and 2 wonderful children.
"Come on, Charlie!"
shouted Pete. Pete was the troublemaker of the class. He was always in detention or getting the cane, but all the other boys looked up to him with a mixture of admiration and fear. Charles quickly followed Pete and 3 of their classmates, Chick, Steve, and Mickey. Pete had come up with a brilliant idea, and if Pete suggested anything, then it went without saying that others would follow along without question. During lunch, Pete shared with the others the plan. His brother had also been to the boarding school, but had since left to attend university. He had informed Pete of a secret way into the tuck shop, a way that would allow them to eat candy like kings for free. They entered the main hall and made their way to the large stage area at the front. The headmaster would orate his morning assembly speeches from it, but it was also used for theatrical productions. Pete dropped to his knees and pulled a small wooden fascia board away from the stage.
Charlie, come here,
he ordered. Charles did as he was told.
Look in between the wooden support beams. You see right at the end? There's a grill. It's just pushed into place. It's really easy to pull out, no screws or anything. The next room is the tuck shop. We all know it's shut and locked 10 minutes before the end of lunch break. Grab as much as you can get. In you go.
Charles froze.
Why me? You're the only one small enough. Go on, Charlie. Do it,
Pete commanded. Charlie hesitated. It looked dirty under the stage, and the cobwebs were thick.
Do it, do it, do it,
the other boys chanted. Not one to disobey Pete, Charles dropped to his knees and moved slowly under the stage area. He could only just squeeze between the wooden beams on either side of him, and he had to do that on all fours with the board scraping his school blazer.
You there yet?
Mickey called. Charles couldn't turn to see who had asked, as there was no room to manoeuvre. He just carried on into the wooden tunnel.
Nearly, I think,
he answered. He reached the end and fumbled for the grill. He couldn't see it through the dust-filled air and dim light. That light suddenly vanished, and Charles was plunged into pitch-black darkness. Behind him, he could hear the board being pushed back into place. Then giggles and the sound of running feet retreating from the scene. Charles also thought he heard the word "loser" being yelled out. It was too muffled to clearly hear who had shouted it, but Charles could easily guess. He tried to shuffle backward, but found it impossible. Going forward had been hard enough. His blazer kept catching on splinters and nails. He was stuck. All he could do was kneel there and sob. He couldn't tell how long he'd been trapped beneath the stage before he heard the first squeak. It seemed like hours, but could have been far less. The squeak was followed by scampering sounds. He felt something crawling up his calf, closely followed by a sharp, agonizing pain. Charles screamed into the darkness. He twisted his body in sheer panic as another bite was followed by another and yet another. He managed to free himself and spun himself onto his back. He kicked his legs wildly and could feel the rats as he tried to pound them with his legs into the wooden boards above and below him. They began to scratch and bite into his shins as they made their way up his legs. Suddenly, with a creak, bright light assaulted his eyes as the board above him was pulled free. Through the blinding light, Charles could vaguely make out a human form. "Okay, Charlie, I've got you," came the unmistakable reassuring voice of the headmaster. As he was pulled from his tomb of torment, he also saw the caretaker, who beat off the rats with a broom, and the school's matron, who shrieked, "Oh my God! Look at his legs!" It should have been a blessing to be released from the nightmare that he had endured. But it was only the beginning. Each night he'd dream of being stuck beneath the floorboards again. He'd scream and kick at the rats as they scratched and gnawed at his shins, whilst they slowly worked their way up his legs. He'd try to shake himself from his nightmare. A floorboard would be lifted, and the daylight would flood in. But now the sight of the headmaster was replaced by that of his mother. "Charles, it's just a dream," she'd say in the reassuring tone that only mothers can give. From the day of that terrifying ordeal, Charles had never been quite the same. Outwardly, he turned into a strong and determined young man. Inwardly, he was something completely different. The nightmares that interrupted his sleep on a regular basis gave him a serious outlook on life, one that made him old before his time. He had become untrusting in nature, and this in turn had made him a formidable businessman and a very shrewd figure in the financial scene. But despite all his success and wealth, he'd gladly give it up for the bliss of being able to obtain a steady run of uninterrupted sleep and peaceful dreams. He would be perfectly happy working in a factory or grocery store if he still had his loving wife, whom he met at a seminar 6 years earlier, and his children beside him. Charles now controlled the nightmares as much as he could, with the use of medication. He still had bad nights when he struggled to break free of his recurring nightmare. The longer they lasted, the further the rats would manage to crawl up his body. Driving back from his office one night, he found it difficult to concentrate. The previous night he'd experienced one of his episodes. He thought about requesting a stronger dose of medication from his doctor. He worried that his wife would begin to realize that he suffered so badly with regular nightmares. It was a pride thing. He was determined to be a strong husband and father in her eyes. She obviously knew about his nightmares, but even after their years of marriage, he had never revealed the nature or cause of them. This was his burden to bear, and his alone. Every marriage has its secrets, he rationalized, and this was his. He cracked the window open a little so the fresh breeze would gently brush against his face as he drove. He hoped this would refresh him enough so that he could put his thoughts in order. He had a big meeting planned for the next day and needed to bring his A game along with him. There was a big merger in the planning. If successful, it would ensure the future of his business. He turned on his car radio, hoping some music might ease the tension that had already started cramping the back of his neck. He tuned into the local station just as a song was finishing. An advert for a DIY store began. "Don't keep putting those jobs off in your home," the narrator said. "It's time to get your house into shape. Just do it," they commanded, accompanied by combined backing voices who chanted, "Do it, do it, do it." Charles was suddenly transported back to his wooden prison beneath the stage. He could hear the voices of Pete, Chick, Steve, and Mickey. "Do it, do it, do it," they urged. Dazzling headlights blinded him. There was a sudden jolt that made his body lurch forward. The sound of breaking glass and crumpling metal was the last thing that he heard before the world turned black. Charles was trapped beneath the stage. The rats chewed chunks from his legs and advanced up his body. They scratched at his knees and began biting and chewing into the soft flesh of his thighs. He screamed and kicked, but still the nightmare continued. He shook his head from side to side in order to escape this realm of torture, but he couldn't break free from the vision. The rodents made their way to his stomach, and they tore at his shirt and then into his chest. He heard the creaking of floorboards, and light filled the void. As one of them was removed, he could see the haloed vision of a person. As it came into focus, he saw the smiling face of his wife. She was gently calling his name. Gwen then began to slowly lower the board again. She forced it back into place until the dimming light of the outside world was gone once more. Charles screamed and beat upon the wood with bloodied fists, but to no avail. How could she do this to him? His thoughts were a haze of panic and confusion. Gwen's eyes darted from Charles to the doctor.
What's happening?
She cried through teary eyes. The doctor injected the last of the fluid from the syringe into Charles's intravenous drip. Your husband has sustained severe internal injuries and major head trauma. It's better that he doesn't come around yet. That will give his body a better chance to heal, he explained. She gently squeezed his hand and briefly left the private hospital room to see her children, who patiently waited in the corridor. The rats had now made it up to Charles's face, where they tore chunks of flesh from his cheeks. He then felt their warm breath on his eyelids as they began their onslaught, first ripping the lids away and then gorging on his eyes. Charles writhed in agony. No matter how hard he shook his head or kicked his feet, he just couldn't stop the horror.
Is Daddy gonna be okay?
His daughter asked.
Is he dead?
She blurted out in a sobbing voice, her tearful eyes letting out a constant stream that ran down her cheeks. Gwen took a tissue from her pocket and gently began to wipe her daughter's face.
It's going to be okay,
she assured her.
The doctor's just given Daddy something to make him sleep while he gets better,
she explained. She then hugged both of her children, whilst holding back her own tears for their sake. Meanwhile, Charles screamed and kicked. Why couldn't he wake? Why? He tried his hardest to break from his bad dream. His thoughts were of his children and his adoring wife. He prayed that he could just return to them again. Three weeks later, Charles finally opened his eyes. The doctor checked the monitor and gave Gwen a reassuring nod. She gently spoke Charles's name. There was no reaction, so she repeated it again and again.
What's happening, Doctor?
He just needs time, he responded in a caring but professional manner. Charles could vaguely see the hospital room ceiling. He looked down and could make out the bed through fuzzy vision, but he could not see his wife. The room was empty, apart from the giant rat that sat on his chest and stared at him with black eyes. After nearly 30 days of medically induced coma, Charles's body had recovered, and once again he had returned to the land of the living. But his mind was gone. Forever. Just Do It by Ian Sputnik. His inaugural collection of short stories, Food for Worms, was published in early 2020. His follow-up, A Can of Worms, in 2023. Both are available from Amazon and all good online book retailers. Tune in next week for our second Sputnik launch. Full Moon. This 200th transmission was transmitted by Nocturnal Transmissions. Thanks in no small part to the generous assistance of our Patreon subscribers, into whose ranks we happily welcome new acolyte Victoria Saboy. Welcome, Victoria. And now, as we slowly evaporate back into the ether, we wish to thank our esteemed cohorts who do so much to keep our grim dream alive. Evan Dooley, Kel Wielden, Alex Brewis, J.B., Rachel Brown, Robert Troy Hampton Peterson, Alicia Townsend, Daniel Clanton, Heathen Soul, Arnie Frank, Tippy Polo, Drenny, Mudkip, Adam, Andy Shammy, Wayne Prince, Eugene Petrie, Jerry Taylor, Jimmy Mack, Johnny Kelly, Amanda Moore, Crunchy Kirby, Rebecca Gates, Sam Hankins, Boole Swiftney, Tim Howard, and Daniel Kamiankowski. All non-public domain stories are featured with the permission of the authors. All voices and production are concocted by Kristin Holland. Until next time, as always, watch the skies, fear the dark, and don't trust anyone, especially yourself. Good night, gentle listener.
But when the lazy moon comes out and shadows round you free, then that's the time to say good night and close your eyes in sleep. In sleep. Good night, good night. I'll see you in the morning. Good night, good night. I'll see you with a dawning. Sunshine will change the night today. Shadows will all be chased away.